The summer of 2018 was a very good and memorable summer. I recall spending countless hours grinding Clash Royale, playing Pokemon, and doing other activities like going to the beach that July. There's one activity in particular that really stood out for me, for good and for bad reasons. Today, I'm going to be discussing FUGE, my experience at it. I'm Zach, and this is Storytime Number 7 on February 12th, 2021. So right now you're probably thinking, what the hell is FUGE? Well, it's actually really hard to explain. It's not really a camp, but it's not a simple event either. So ours took place 7 hours away, I'll just refer to it as a trip. So I'd say the best way to summarize it would be that it's a 6-day church trip event held at some random college where you do group activities, worship God, and do community service. Kind of complicated, but that's really the best way I could put it. But I think you'll understand it a bit better as I talk, just like other story times. Now, before I get started, I need to address a couple things. Firstly, I won't be discussing any lessons from the event. While I really wouldn't mind talking about them and really wouldn't care if someone got offended, I'm not going to... that hurt. But I'm not going to talk about them only because I can't remember them, as this trip was a pretty long time ago. What I mean by that, this was 2.5 years ago. Secondly, if you get offended by the fact that I mentioned God or Christianity in general, then you can go cry in the corner. I could care less. You get so offended to the point everything I talk about triggers you, just click off the video. Act like an adult. Fourth, the story time will be split into 3 parts. Those will be the backstory, FUGE, and post-FUGE. I think the stills speak for themselves. Anyways, with those out of the way, let's talk about the backstory. So before I get into the trip itself, I need to discuss events that occurred before it. So this trip cost about $300, with it being, of course, paid over time. The first payment was in February, 2nd in April, and 3rd in May. This trip would lasted from June 18, 2018 to June 23rd, 2018. I was a rising freshman when I attended this trip. It took place at Belmont University, a random college located in Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville is about 7 hours away, so the bus ride would be a long one up there and back. Let's move on to the actual trip. I woke up on Monday, June 18th, 2018 at around 6:30 in the morning. Kind of had to, as we were leaving at like 8 o'clock, and I had to be at church at like 7:30. So my mom woke me up and bought me some breakfast. Then I was at church. We loaded up the bus and were ready to head on out. Should note that this bus wasn't like just a regular bus. It was like full-on bus meant for trips like these. Each seat had an outlet, so we were good in terms of battery. Now, throughout all the trips we took on this bus, I sat with a friend whose name I won't mention as she requests to keep her privacy. But basically, I sat with a girl about 2 years older than me. She was probably my best friend at church. However, when I was a freshman, she wouldn't go to college very often as she was pretty busy with work. But anyways, we sat together and mostly grinded Clash Royale trophies. I believe she was in Spell Valley and I was in Frozen Peak. Anyways, trip up there was about 7 hours long, just expected. We weren't allowed to bring any devices other than our phones, which was pretty bad, as having my DS up there would have helped a lot. So now let's move on, now that we've arrived, let's move on about the college. What was it? So we stayed at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. It was extremely hot, being like 95 degrees when we arrived. Campus was massive. Like, I probably walked like 15 miles total throughout the trip just because this place was so enormous. So now let's talk about the part that really made me despise this trip and really makes me question if any planning was even done with this trip. There was an odd before I get there, so we had to pick someone to room with. Everyone picked their roommate, but I was left out. I could not find anyone to room with. There were an odd number of boys, and dorms only had 2 keys and 2 particular dorm. I told one of the youth leaders about this, and then they asked if anyone else did not have a roommate, and nobody else did. So therefore, I was that one kid left out. There was plenty of emotions I felt throughout this. One emotion would be betrayal. I met plenty of friends that year at church and was getting very comfortable around everyone, and now seeing that I've been basically betrayed by people who probably didn't even care about me at all was pretty poor. I know it might sound selfish, but the fact that I thought of friends to room with but nobody thought of me just felt like these people really just didn't care and that they were fakes. Another emotion that went through my mind was embarrassment. Being the kid left out is pretty embarrassing, as I really felt like I was lower than everyone, and to a degree I basically was. Finding out I was the kid that nobody really gave a damn about felt hard and embarrassing, but now that I'm older, I've gotten used to that. A third emotion I also felt was anger. although this was not really anger at the others who rejected me. It was anger at the church leaders for not planning for this. They knew how many boys and how many girls were going. They knew the dorms were for 2 people each, so thinking it was okay to simply go on a trip with an odd amount was a pretty poor decision if you ask me. This trip could have easily been solved, and they could have just simply made sure there was an even number of boys and an even number of girls. I don't know if any girls were left out, but I guarantee you there was a girl left out too. And no, it was not my friend who rode on the bus. If they were going to allow this, then they should have also created a plan for that. Remember, this is not a surprise. They knew there was only going to be 2 people per dorm, but they never made a plan for that and just left for the one left out. So the whole situation in general was easily avoidable. They just never planned beforehand. The way the leaders resolved this was by moving a mattress into a dorm, so the dorm was shared by 3. However, I did not have a key, so I literally had to embarrassingly wait out in the hallway until one of my roommates arrived back to unlock. I was always getting back to the dorm early, and I normally had to wait like 15 minutes while the other boys walked across the hallway to their rooms, wondering why this dude was waiting outside a dorm. Another situation was moving the mattress into the dorm. I had to pick up the mattress and move it across the hall to my dorm. One kid questioned what I was doing, and I also heard laughter from others. Of course, they might have been laughing at something else, but knowingly they were probably laughing at me really just made me feel hopeless, and just to be honest, I really wanted to beat the shit out of them. But I knew if I was to say or do something, it would not end up in my favor, so I stayed silent. And I should note that all this happened on the first day, June 18th, meaning I was going to have to endure 5 more days of this. Oh boy, this was going to be rough. Now, I will say something good happened in this situation, although probably the only good thing, but it was still a good thing. Church leaders put me in a dorm with 2 boys. While one of them I don't really remember and was pretty insignificant, the other was very significant. This boy felt genuinely sorry for me and decided to be very nice with me. I was very thankful for this, as at least one person recognized my struggle. Like, without him, I honestly would have tried to find a way to go home early. Like, I might have tried to eat too much or purposely pass out. He was also that kid that got me interested in playing harder Geometry Dash levels, and he is still my inspiration when it comes to Geometry Dash and why I continue to grind demons that take me sometime over 1,000 attempts. So as you can tell, first day was rough. Glaringly, it was the hardest day. But the other days except the next days prior, other than the 21st, would actually be pretty decent. Now, to get on a brighter note, let's talk about food. We all know school food tastes like dog shit, but this university was different. They did a buffet every breakfast and dinner, and you got to choose everything. All the meals except breakfast were good, as the breakfast was just not very good. Therefore, I just skipped breakfast. But dinner was great. Plenty of options, and the food was actually good. I think I ate mac and cheese every night just because that was my favorite food at the time. Should note that mac and cheese isn't my favorite food anymore, as Chinese takeout has kind of overtaken that. Now, you might be asking about lunch. Lunch was served at our site, which I'll explain what a site is later. Now let's discuss the schedule for this trip. So our schedule for Tuesday through Thursday was waking up at 6:30 and eating breakfast, begin worship or praise at 7:45, break into our site groups at 8:45, do a Bible study with our site till 10:45, leave for our sites and stay there till about 3, free time from 3 to 5, dinner from 5 to 6, then a Bible study with everyone at the camp from 6 to 8, then a thing called nightlife from 8 to 10, then church group time from 10 to 11, and then go to sleep at 11. Before I discuss this, I want to talk about sleep. Well, it might seem like I got a decent 7.5 hours of sleep. I only got like maybe 5 hours of sleep at night. The reason this is because other boys were acting like assholes, making a ton of noise at like 12 in the morning. Like, bruh, I'm trying to sleep so I can be well rested. I don't need you to laugh harder than my dad does watching Seinfeld. That happened every night, unfortunately, which bugged my roommates too, as they also had the same philosophy about sleep as I did. Bad thing is that the adults were in the same hallway and they didn't even do a damn thing about it. Lights out at 11, so why the hell are these people making noise at 3 in the morning? Now, I did say that this was for Tuesdays and Thursdays, but for Friday, well, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. But Friday was different. We would basically have the same schedule, but instead of a big Bible study, we did an event called Mega, where our site groups at the camp would compete against each other in an event. I'll explain more about that later. Now I am finally going to answer your dying question about sites. So sites were basically community service we did. These sites could be with people from different churches, In my case, everyone was from a different church, which was perfect for me because we already discussed what happened on the first day. My side in particular was childcare, where we would work with young elementary school children. Considering I wanted to be a math teacher, this was a great experience. While I don't want to teach elementary school, I want to teach middle school. This still gave a good experience as I still needed to learn to work with youth. Now let's talk about the people in the sites. So after being betrayed by almost everyone at church, I kind of felt like maybe all churches are like this. They all betray you. I was wrong. I just simply lost the church lottery. As the people I worked with, my sites are some of the nicest people I have ever met. I met a lot of friends up there. While unfortunately I don't have any contact information, I still remember them, and I still remember them for being very friendly. I'll start by talking about Jason. Jason was from Mississippi. He was rather shy and pretty calm. We got along very quickly and became good friends throughout the trip. There's also another friend whose name I forgot, but he was nice too. He also really liked Clash Royale, meaning we're automatically friends. I remember many times we played double battles together during Bible study, and we destroyed our opponents, mostly just because he was in Electro Valley and I was only in Frozen Peak. And considering the June 2018 update had just came out, we both got to learn together about the new cards and how the game worked now. It was a great time to be a Clash Royale player. I remember quitting in August of 2018, but I literally just came back to the game last Monday. That's why I chose to play this game for gameplay for this video. The memories. Anyways, let's talk about the environment of this site. So our site was obviously a summer camp. Parents would drop their kids off here if they had no other option, as this was a completely free program funded by FUGE. We got to play with the kids and do a bunch of other stuff. It was really fun. Being around site groups was obviously the best part of the trip, and the site itself was really fun too, but damn it was hot. Like, I'm pretty sure every day it was like 100 degrees outside. Of course we were inside most of the time, but when we'd still be outside pretty often, mostly at when we're at the college and not at our site groups. But wow, it was hot. Now let's fast forward to Thursday, June 21st, 2018. If you know me, June 21st is a very special day, as it's my birthday. This was my 14th birthday. So how did it go? Well, in simple terms, it was living hell. Normally, I celebrate my birthday at home, as I don't like going somewhere and because being sung happy birthday in public is the weirdest thing ever. I never mentioned it was my birthday at all for obvious reasons, but my youth pastor had different things in mind. I should note that my youth pastor was the only other person I knew who took part in my site group. But he decided to tell the site group, decided it was my birthday, and didn't go too bad at least. They just sang happy birthday, but they chose possibly the worst time at sites. So the kids also sang happy birthday. Yeah, it was pretty weird and definitely not a good highlight of the trip, but it's not the worst thing that can happen. It's not like they're betraying me. I mean, they at least thought about me. The site was obviously the best part, and like the people that I would at least be appreciative that sung me happy birthday, because they obviously cared about me, and they were, as I've mentioned before, they were very nice. But this wasn't the worst of it. I really didn't care for my birthday that day, as I planned on celebrating it on the 23rd when I got back home. While I did do that, which I'll discuss later, my church had different plans. So how it worked out was that we were in church groups. My youth pastor asked me to do a favor for him. I did it, but when I came back, the lights in the room were off and nobody is in sight. So I'm like, where the hell is everyone? And then the lights turned back on, everyone randomly appears and starts singing happy birthday. Probably shouldn't have, but this scared the living shit out of me. So that was embarrassing, but it couldn't get more embarrassing, right? Well, it was on video and it was posted on the FUGE highlights for our church. Damn it! Well, there went my reputation for 2 weeks. Can't really criticize them too harshly, as they did think about me, but I still criticize them putting me on video. I think that was excessive and inappropriate. So the next day would finally be back to normal. Well, until Mega. I mentioned Mega earlier, but basically Mega was the big event where every site group competed for a gold trophy. I don't think we won, as I barely remember anything from this, since this did take place over 2.5 years ago, and my memory has been pretty vague about it. For most, Mega is an important part. For me, I honestly didn't find it important, so that's why I forgot about the details of the event, but I still remembered that it happened. Now we move on to Saturday, June 23rd. This would be the day we would be leaving. It will also be in the top 10 best days of my life, contrary to June 18th being in the top 10 worst. So we packed up the bus and headed home. We didn't get home until around 7 p.m. but when I got home, wow, did this make the day become a masterpiece. So I said a bit earlier that I chose to actually celebrate my birthday on the 23rd, and this is why. So I get back home and back to my room, and I see my room got a redo, which was very refreshing. I then got a bunch of gifts on my bed. Got some new games, an iTunes card, a bag of Doritos, some clothes, and more. That night my dad held a cookout by our pool. It was like an 8 at night, but the sun was still shining, as note that June 23rd is one of the longest days of the year. Afterwards, I got to eat cookie cake and finish my hamburger by myself in the kitchen. There, I ate and played BTD6, which had just came out a week prior, and this was such a magical experience. So that was the end of FUGE, but it's not the end of Storytime. Now I want to talk about the impacts FUGE had, most of them being negative, of course. This is the post-FUGE section. As I've stated before, I learned a hard lesson up at FUGE on the first night. I like referring to this lesson as the Bloods lesson, mostly because I watch a ton of crime documentaries that seem to feature the Bloods gang every 2 seconds. So one thing I've learned from watching these documentaries is how gangs work. Basically, your gang members don't actually care about you, they just want to exploit you. You might think that you do, but they don't care. This is how so many people die of gang violence. I kind of refer to the situation the first day. You think that they are your friends, but they are not. These people are actually fakes, just like the Bloods or any other gang out there. I believe in having very loyal friends rather than just a bunch of friends that were not loyal. These people obviously were not loyal. Clearly they didn't care. If they cared, they would have thought of me, or they might have asked me if I couldn't be with them. Should know that these were the same people I became good friends in 8th grade, and now they rejected me. Hard lesson to learn about betrayal, but it has to be done, and that was my time to learn it. Now, finding loyal friends at church is almost impossible, considering I had only 2, who both of them didn't go to church that much. I really don't know how to find friends at church, and I should note that one of those was the girl that I rode to church with, and the other was the dude who felt sorry for me. I think I might be able to become friends again with the same people that laughed at me and betrayed me, as they too got older just like I did, and I think they've become wiser too. But it's honestly a hard decision, as I don't want them ultimately rejecting me like they did there. However, I did do this throughout most of 9th grade. What happened? Well, 1, I was unsuccessful at trying to bring back our friendship. 2, I was isolated from all of my other friends. They were 8th graders. And 3, I was sexually harassed by one of them. The dude who sexually harassed me, though, did apologize, and we're actually cool now. But with all this in mind, I really just decided that maybe I should just simply ignore everyone. They obviously were not worth my time, and of course they didn't care. So I started isolating myself from everyone around April or May of 2019. Some of them tried to get me back, but I ain't a dumbass. I know what they're trying to use me for. I know exactly what they tried to pull in 8th grade, and then reject me later. I already know, so I said no. They walked off. Only issue is now that I had basically nobody to talk to. Now let's fast forward to May of 2019, all the way to November of 2020. Now, a junior, I had isolated myself from everyone for about a year and a half, but in mid-November, the boy who genuinely felt sorry for me at FUGE passed away. I'm not going to explain the details for his privacy and for his respect. The girl I was friends with never came to church, and the boy only came to church rarely. So I had absolutely no hope of talking to anyone at church, as these were the only people I was willing to talk to. But his death really impacted me in terms of being sociable. Ever since his death, I have decided to try to become more social and try to get involved at church again like I was in 8th grade. This was going to be very hard, as I had not talked to anyone since 9th grade, and I was in 11th grade now. Not only that, but it seemed like the boys that had rejected me still probably would reject me. So I knew I had no luck of making friends with any fellow juniors. But because I have matured 3 grades since the events, they're new people. I think I have done a good job so far. I was friends with a kid who literally had the same name as me. Yes, his name is Zach as well. We were friends when I was a freshman, and he was in 7th grade, but then I isolated myself and therefore we never talked. Now, I was ready to become friends with him again, and it's worked out well. We play a lot of Minecraft on his server, and it's always so fun. I've met some of his friends too. Of course, I'm the oldest on the server, but it's still super cool finally getting back to an old friend. There's still others at church that I want to meet too. Of course, all of them are not in 11th grade, as I probably will never be able to befriend anyone in my grade unless they are new to church and were not at FUGE. But overall, I'm still not very sociable, as I still don't talk it that much. But I have a great starting point, and I think my friend who passed away, I think he would be very proud. Now, to conclude the story time, I want to discuss my opinion on this trip. Unsurprisingly, I hated FUGE. Getting very little sleep, being betrayed by the friends I made in 8th grade, having a birthday up there, yeah, it was awful. But while I absolutely hated it and did not enjoy it, I'm still very glad I went. I think that this trip was important, as I learned a lot about God, as well as how easily you can feel comfortable around the wrong group. I'm also glad I learned because I'm also glad I learned because I had good friends with someone who would only be up there for about who would only live for about 2.5 years more. I wrote this very poorly. And I'm just so glad we were friends, and I'm glad I was able to not only he make my life better, but I was able to make his life better. I'm really glad that I was able to do that, because he would only have 2.5 years more to live. Surprisingly, I do actually recommend this trip, as it's very powerful, and I think that if I didn't have this whole situation with everyone, I'd honestly really enjoy this trip, as sites were so much fun, and meeting people around the country was so awesome. So that's all I have for today's video. Next week for Storytime 8 on February 19th, 2021, I'll be talking about my swimming career, from when I began to when I quit. So that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys all next week. Bye!